Okay, continuing in the book of Exodus, the book of redemption. We're now in the next portion. Last week was Mishpatim. This week's Torah portion is called Terumah. So I'll start reading. Remember last week, pretty much the whole Torah portion was about some of the laws that Moses was giving the Jewish people. They were laws of how we would interact with each other. Laws about the Sabbath, laws about the high holy days, the pilgrim festivals, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And now we're transitioning back into the story, a little bit more about the story of what it is that God is wanting of us. So it says in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, this week's Torah portion is called Parshat Terumah. God said to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, and let them take for me a portion. From every man whose heart motivates him, you shall take my portion." Moses is coming to the people, asking them to donate, asking them to give contributions to build the tabernacle. There's a controversy in our commentators as to the order in which this particular Torah portion comes into play. We haven't yet read about the incident of the Jewish people miscalculating when Moses was going to come down from Mount Sinai, that maybe Moses wasn't coming down. They get very anxious that Moses isn't coming. We'll talk about that when we get to the incident of the Jewish people, those involved in worshipping the golden calf. Some of the commentators suggest that the building of the Mishkan was a atonement, was done in response to the people's building this calf and worshipping this calf. Other people say no, the Mishkan was something that we needed, independent of whether there was the incident of the golden calf or not. So if you take the fact that it was a response to the golden calf, then this is out of order. It shouldn't be. If you go chronologically, we should have the story of the golden calf, and then we should have the story about building and making the Mishkan. But we don't. It's in the reverse order. The Torah, therefore, isn't necessarily in chronological order. What the Torah is teaching us, it has to be in this order because there's something we need to learn. So whether or not it's in response to the golden calf perhaps isn't the point. The point is that we need a Mishkan, and we even need a Mishkan in our days, right? So we don't have the tabernacle. We're not in the wilderness anymore, and we're not in Jerusalem with our holy temple. But we are living in an age, and we're living in a reality where we need to read this Torah portion. This Torah portion is foundational to who we are as Jews in exile, to who we are as Jews without there being a temple in Jerusalem that is the focal point of our Torah, of our service. You can argue that it is, that we have the space, we have the Western Wall, we have the idea of where the temple should be, and that is a very holy space. I'm not disputing that, but we are obviously in a time where we don't have a temple. There will be a third temple. There isn't a third temple now. So what do we have, and what's happening here in this week's Torah portion? So the Jewish people come out of Egypt. They've had the splitting of the Red Sea. They've heard of all of the plagues. They're now in the desert. They're in this desert environment. They come to Mount Sinai. We had the revelation of God at Mount Sinai last week. We had the people with their rallying cry saying, "Na'aseh v'nishma," we will do what God tells us to do, and we will listen, we'll learn, we'll continue the process. We want this relationship with God. We are yearning to have a relationship with God in our lives, but we can't have the intense relationship that we had when God revealed himself at Sinai. If you remember, the Medrash tells us that the people literally died, their souls left their bodies. They couldn't sustain this kind of high intensity spiritual connection to God. They lost their lives in the process, and God reconstituted them, and they said, "Okay, Moses, you go up Mount Sinai, you go get the Torah, you get the word of God, bring it back down to us." So God is saying to Moses, go down and speak to the people and tell them to bring contributions. They should build this Mishkan. They're going to build this tabernacle. So the word terumah is a portion, is an offering. It's something that they're giving voluntarily. It's something that they're not obligated to do. It's something that comes from their heart. They want this relationship with God. God wants a relationship with us, and here we are. We're going to create something together. So if you go back to the creation of the world, right? God created the world. Why did God create the world? God was everything. There was nothing other than God. The whole of existence was God. God was beyond time. God was beyond space. There was only God, right? So then we talked a little bit about this Kabbalistic idea called tzimtzum, where God on some level sort of withdraws or hides or kind of like conceals himself such that there can be perceived to be a vacuum within which all of creation can exist. And we can think that we're existing independent of God. We can think that we're in this space where there isn't God, or we can try to imagine, again, the analogy is the fetus inside the womb of the mother. So the fetus is inside the womb of the mother and has no perception of the mother, and the mother is all that the fetus is all. That the mother is independent of the fetus, but the fetus is not independent of the mother. The fetus exists inside the mother, but the mother does not exist inside the fetus, right? So in that way, that's a way to understand on some level how it is that we can exist thinking that we're independent of God, but we're not. But God can exist independent of us. Why did God create the world? The commentators tell us, the Ramchal teaches, that the world was created for God to bestow goodness upon us, that there was a goodness that God wanted to put into the world, would put into people, and he created mankind to bestow goodness upon us. So the foundation of the world was goodness, was giving. God's ultimate giver, the quintessential giver. And we, who are created in the image of God, have a mission to be God-like. In order to come close to God, in order to have an encounter with God, in order to be God-like, we have to look and see, what does God do? How does he manifest in this world? And then we try to be that. So God is a giver. So God is giving us an opportunity to give. He's saying, take from me a portion from every man who motivates him voluntarily. You shall give a portion to build the Mishkan. There are 15 materials that were requested to be given: gold and silver and copper and various skins and so on. We'll come to that in a little bit. But we were enjoined to give of our hearts. It was not obligatory. We didn't have to give. There were 3 contributions that went into the running and the building of the tabernacle, 2 of which were obligatory. We had to give them, and 1 was voluntarily. This is the voluntary one for the workings, for the vessels of the tabernacle, for the Mishkan. I'm going to use the word Mishkan instead of tabernacle, but it's a structure within which God will rest his presence, so to speak. So this is the voluntary contribution. This comes from our desire to have a relationship. This is us giving back. This is us recognizing that what I have doesn't belong to me, that I am just the conduit for the redistribution of the wealth, that everything belongs to God, and that this terminology where it says take from me. So if I have something, you say give me, don't take from me. So the idea of taking means, on some level, you could understand, perhaps one way of understanding it is that it's not really mine. You're going to take it from me, but it's not really mine anyway. It belongs to God, and I'm going to give back what's really God, but I get to be the one to choose to give it back. So if you had 2 children and you want one child to give a present to the other child, but they don't have any money, you give them money so they can go buy the gift to give to the other child, right? Or to the parent or to the teacher or whatever. But you're giving them the money to go buy the present for the teacher. They get invested in what they're buying. They use the money you've given them to purchase this item, and they go and they give it, and they're invested. They're part of the process. It's different than you giving it on behalf of them. They have nothing to do with it. You're including them in as a partner in the process, and that's on some level maybe a way of understanding what God's doing. Like with anything, even in our world, so many thousands of years later, where God is so much more hidden, that we have a perception that we have all this stuff and that we own all this stuff and it's ours. And what the Torah is wanting to teach us, what God is wanting to teach us, is that really everything is not ours. It's a gift. It's a redistribution. I'm gifting it to you so that you can redistribute it. So here's God saying, give to the building of this Mishkan. Like, you're going to give this stuff, and it's going to build something within which I will reside. I will rest my presence upon this Mishkan, just like I rested my presence upon Mount Sinai when I had this revelation of Sinai. So in many of the commentators speak about the Mishkan, speak about the temple in Jerusalem, speak about our synagogue, speak about our hearts, all the same thing, all the same idea, as places where there is a greater concentration of godly presence. So careful not to say that there is no God presence. God is present everywhere, but there are greater concentrations, or that our ability to perceive God's presence is greater. Our ability to perceive God's presence is greater. So when we go to the Western world, perhaps you might prepare yourself, you might have this sense that it's there, and you might actually feel that you have some encounter, that you feel more spiritual in that place. We have obviously other examples in the Torah where God was in this place, but I didn't know it, I didn't feel it, I didn't have a perception of it. How do we help ourselves have a perception of that? How do we get in touch with the fact that God's all around us, that we have to look for godliness everywhere? So we're giving. When we give, we become lovers. We love that to whom the person to whom or the place where we give. If we give to our family members, if we give to our friends, we become more invested in them. With our children, if those of us who are blessed with children, we are constantly giving to our children. We are giving to our children all the time. And in that giving becomes a greater sense of our love for our children. You could say, what's the chicken or the egg? Do we love them and then give to them? But I would also suggest that giving fosters the feelings of love that we have for them, which is probably one of the reasons why maybe our children don't, in general, don't love us as much as we love them. Because we're always giving to them. We're responsible for them. We hover over them. We want the best for them in a different way than we want for our parents. Like, we love our parents, but it's not the same kind of love. And maybe it turns as our parents get older and we get the opportunity to give back to them, and we're giving and we're giving and giving, and maybe we love them more as they get older, and we turn the tables in terms of caretaking, in terms of giving. But the point I want to bring out is the notion of what being a giving person does for us, how it transforms us into people who can expand out our embrace, that the people to whom we give become more a part of us. And that maybe that's one of the ways in which we can mend relationships, is by giving. We talked last week about the donkey who is burdened by the load, this donkey of our enemy. And the Torah tells us, God tells us, that if you had two donkeys that were burdened by loads, and one was owned by your enemy and one was owned by your friend, you should go and unload the donkey of your enemy first. Meaning that we understand the psychological barrier we have. We want to avoid the people that we are unhappy with, or we have issues with, or that we're whatever, that we're annoyed with, or we're angry with. But really, the Torah is saying us, in order to rectify that, in order to turn around that situation, to give them, you have to unload their donkey, right? So God's saying here, give to the building of this Mishkan, give of your stuff. And the people gave, and they gave so much stuff that there was a halting of the giving. Like, no, okay, we have enough, we don't need any more. And here is a message of in Hebrew it's called zrizut, a message of zeal, of doing something, right? You're given the opportunity, do it. Don't wait. Actually, the elders said, we'll wait and see what's left behind. We'll not give right away. We'll see what the people will give, and then we'll give the rest. And they missed out. So we don't want to miss out. Similarly, there's a story. I don't know if this is a true story, but it brings out the point of a building fund for, let's say, a building fund to build a new hospital. And one big donor comes along. He says, I'll pay for the whole thing. It'll be the Mr. So-and-so hospital, and I will give all the money that's going to go into this hospital. And the person who's taking in the money says, no, I don't want it to be that way. I don't know that this will ever happen. I want this to be a community hospital. I want everybody to contribute. I want the poor man on the street to contribute. I want the rich man. I want everyone to contribute, but everybody should have the possibility of contributing, because if we all contribute, then we all own it. It's all something that we have invested ourselves in. We put something in, we've built it ourselves, and we have a part in it. So whether you've donated $100,000 or if you've donated $1, there's a sense that you're connected to it, that you've invested something in it of yours. Okay, so here we lead to another point, which is that the one of the biggest difficulties that people have, that is built into the human being, is giving things that we think, especially money that's ours, as we have a lot of rules about money and what to do with money, and things that are requested of us and things that are expected of us, and making us, we have an obligatory amount of of tzedakah that we are supposed to give, 10%. But then over and above that, like it's hard sometimes. We're not, no, it's mine. I don't want to give it away. And so God's saying, no, I want you to exercise that muscle, right? Instead of giving $100 to one person, I want you to give $101 bills to 100 people. Exercising the muscle of giving, of generosity, of being a giver will ultimately benefit you even more. So to give one-time donation will not exercise as many giving muscles as if you give $101 bills away. That will generate a sense of you being a giver and you being godlike, and that's what we want to achieve. Okay, so here we have the Mishkan. This Mishkan is going to be the resting place for the divine presence. Just like Mount Sinai is described, where God reveals himself, we have a peeling away of the barriers that separate us from God, and we had this encounter. We couldn't sustain that. We go back to a more quote unquote real existence, and now it's necessary for us to not just leave our inspirational moments behind, right? So many of us, hopefully all of us, have had inspirational moments where we've had our Mount Sinai experience and now we're into the desert. But we want to continue to have Mount Sinai experiences, but they're not going to be like the original Mount Sinai, but we might have to recreate them. We might have to have, instead of having a week in Israel on an Israel trip, we might want to have a get-together with those women that we went to Israel with, and we'll reconvene. Or we might, instead of having, a week-long, speakers and things and all this different stuff to inspire us, we might want to have one day or one night or something where we're going to keep inspiring ourselves. We're going to keep connected to something that transcends the mundane, that takes us out of ourselves, that puts us in a higher plane. And that's what the Mishkan, whether it's a rectification for the sin of the golden calf, that where we engaged in a certain form of idolatry, and God's saying, you have to make the Mishkan because you have to know that I'm the true God. I am God, and we know you're God, but we got waylaid along the way. Whether it's that, or whether it's just our human need to have spirituality, to have places to go, to have a makom, to have a place where God's presence will reside. So God's saying, here's how you make this Mishkan. And now the rest of the book of Exodus is going to be descriptions of how to make, quote unquote, this little apartment for God in our midst, right? So we had creation of the world. When God created the world, he created a place for us to exist. It took maybe, 10, 15 sentences in the Torah to describe the creation of the world. Not very much. Didn't take much for God, God the omnipresent, God the everything, to create a space for us in his world. But for us to create a space for God in our world is harder. So there's exact specifications. It has to be like this, it has to be like that. And now we're going to start reading about what those specifications are and what it has to look like and what it's going to be, such that we've created that which God tells us to do, and his presence will then descend and reside amongst us. So we have the physical structure of the Mishkan. God promises that if we build it appropriately, we do everything God tells us, that he will rest his presence upon it. But the language of the Torah also says that I will reside amongst them. I will reside amongst you. It'll be we in our hearts. Our hearts is somehow bringing godliness into our heart. That's another challenge, to always keep God present, to have God before us always, to understand that our lives are infused with spirituality and the potential to come closer to God all the time, which is why we had all the laws of Mishmatim, all the laws of how to live your everyday lives came before this. So we can understand that it's not just that we leave God in the synagogue or we leave God, for the high holidays, that God's infused into the world, infused into our lives. There's a connection all the time. And that's what we want to have. That's what we want to achieve. Okay, so we're going to take this portion. So this word portion, this word terumah, Rav Hirsch points out, it means to lift up when we give. Oh, so it's really interesting because one of the items that goes inside the Mishkan, you probably all know this, is the Aron, is the Ark. Raiders of the Lost Ark. We have lost the Ark. What's the Ark? The Ark is the cupboard, is the container for the tablets of stone. As you know, Moses comes down, he sees the sin of the golden calf, he throws down the tablets, they're shattered, those plus the ones he goes back up to engrave himself and bring back down, plus the Torah scroll that he writes, that Moses writes, go inside this Aron, go inside this little cabinet, this little storage space inside the Mishkan, and that's the heart. That is the heart of the tabernacle. So we're going to talk about the Aron in a minute, but it's like our heart, like what's in our heart. What do we keep inside our heart? What's there? Can we root out anything that's extraneous, anything that's negative, and make it all, shiny and pure? No, that's our lifelong task. Our lifelong task is connect ourselves to the source of all life. Connect ourselves to the greatest giver, the quintessential giver. To connect ourselves to the source of all, the source of all, and that's how we're going to achieve bringing God into our hearts. So how do we do that? Okay, so this is the portion that you are to take from them: gold, silver, copper, turquoise, purple, scarlet wool, linen and goat hair, red dyed ram skins, tachash skins, acacia wood, oil for illumination, spices for the ointment oil and the aromatic incense, shoham stones and stones for the settings for the breastplate, for the ephod and the breastplate of the high priest. So these are the items that we are going to donate, and they shall make a sanctuary for me, God, so that I, God, may dwell among them. And that's the crux, that God's going to not reside over there in the Mishkan. He's going to reside, yes, he's going to reside in the Mishkan, and he's going to reside inside of us, right? We have to be people who are carrying God with us. We have to be the emissaries of God. We have to be the people who are going to act in a way and live our lives connected to God, such that we're bringing godliness into the world. We're bringing light into the world. So we talk about this all the time, over and over and over again. But here it is. God says, when you reach out to me, when you follow me, when you want to be like me, I'll come down, I'll dwell amongst you. Like everything that I show you, the form of the tabernacle and all the form of all the vessels, and so shall you do. Okay, so that's what we have to do. I want to point out one thing, is the tachash skins. This tachash, what's the tachash? A tachash was an animal that only existed at that time, and apparently it was multicolored, and its hide, its skin was used for some of the coverings in the Mishkan. And so this animal was its only purpose in its whole existence before it became extinct was to provide the skins to be used in the making of the Mishkan. Like that was its own focus. The whole focus was that. All right, and the acacia wood. So this acacia wood in Hebrew is shittim. So shittim is a great, if you take the letters of shittim, it spells out shalom, tova, Yeshua, and Mechila. So this wood, and it's amazing if you think about how the Torah is written, and the word for the kind of wood that's going to go into making of the Mishkan has certain letters, and these certain letters are the building blocks for the world. Like Hebrew words are not like English words that just sort of come into being. They're building blocks for the world. The way in which the world is built is on the letters, on the Hebrew letters. They are like the Lego pieces that build up the world, right? So if you take the shittim wood, shittim represents peace, shalom. It represents goodness, tova. It represents salvation, Yeshua, and it represents mechila, which is forgiveness. So even the sort of wood that the Jewish people brought with them out of Egypt, and it's amazing actually, I think there's a medrash that says that Jacob, our forefather, when he went down to Egypt, he took seeds with him of the shittim, of the acacia wood, and he planted them because he knew, he had a prophecy that in the future the Jewish people would take this wood out with them. They would bring that wood out with them so that they would have the wood to build. What are they going to build? They're going to build the table, the shulchan. They're going to build the altar, and they're going to build the Aron, this Aron. Now, one of the things about the Aron, it's an amazing thing. It's not just a box. It's an amazing structure. It is actually a wooden box which has gold in the inside and gold on the outside. So that's the basic structure. Gold on the outside, wood, acacia wood, shittim wood, and then gold on the inside. And from this we learn many, many things. And into this box went the tabernacle, went the tablets, went the whole tablets, the broken tablets, and the Torah scroll that Moses wrote. So they go into this box that's gold on the outside and gold on the inside. And from that we learn, and if we think about the center of the Mishkan being the ark, being the Aron, and the center of the human being our heart, So we want the inside and the outside to be consistent. We want that which we show to the outside world, that part of us that is visible to others, the outside part of us, to be consistent and be consonant with that which is on the inside. So who are we on the inside? We have to know who we are on the inside. I'm not quite sure how to do that, but maybe through our lifetime we get to learn about ourselves more, and we quieten ourselves down, and we try to understand how we tick. But that what we are on the inside and what we are on the outside is the same, and not to be hypocritical, not to say, oh, I really want to do this, but I'm going to do that, or I'm really and maybe sometimes we have to have the outside part lead the inside part. Like I want to be something, so I want to be a happier person, so I'm going to smile more. I might not be so happy on the inside, but if I smile more, maybe I'll become happier. Maybe I'll become that happy person that I want to be. I don't know. This is not a class in how to make the inside and the outside be consistent, but it is a suggestion that is something that Torah is teaching us is a good thing, right? It's a good thing when we want to be gold on the outside, but we also want to be gold on the inside. And how do we do that? And on the insides, in between those two inside-outside gold boxes is this box of made out of wood, made out of the shittim wood, which represents peace and goodness and salvation and forgiveness. And those are all things like wood that grow, that are malleable, that change, right? So we might have peace, but we could always have more peace. We might be forgiving, but there will always be more forgiveness. There might be goodness, but we can always be better, right? So in that sense, there's a growth orientation to this box of the Aron. As much as it's fixed by the gold is fixed and doesn't move, but the wood that's inside can move and shape and can grow, and that's what we need to do. We need to be that wood that's growing in the right direction. It's growing in the right direction. It's in influencing the inside and the outside so that they're consonant. So that's an idea we get from that. And then on top, the lid that went on top. So the question is whether the lid is part of the Aron or whether it's separate. But the fact is the lid was a piece of gold. It was a solid piece of gold, and the gold lid had on top of it two little cherubs, two keruvim, two little angelic keruvim, little cherubs that were part of that piece of wood, and they were facing each other when we were doing our best, when we were shining up, when we were letting God in, when we were doing what God wants, when we're in good favor with God. These two keruvim face each other. They have wings, outstretched wings, right, which are not folded back, but they are outspread. The outspread wings of the keruvim, of these angelic beings, these gold figurines on top of the Aron. They're spread out like a canopy. So the one has his wings up and the other one has her wings up, and these wings create a shelter. The word for that shelter is schach, which is the same word used for the covering in our sukkot. So when we build a sukkah at Sukkot's time, and we have our walls that are made out of whatever, fabric or wood or whatever they're made out of, and then on top it's made out of something natural. It's made out of palm branches or trees or bamboo or whatever, but it has to be something natural, like something live, but that's not living anymore, that's cut off from its source, and it's laid on top. And that's called schach. And the schach is the same schach that these two angelic beings on top of the Aron create when they put their wings up. So this kind of canopy, and that the faces are facing down towards the Aron, facing down towards the Torah. The focus of these two keruvim, of these two angelic beings, is the Torah. That's a lesson. The focus is the Torah. The focus is wisdom, divine wisdom. That's the focus. That's what we should be focusing on. Look at your Torah wisdom as the focal point, as what you are directing your attention to. That's where you should be. Look at these keruvim. So these keruvim, these two angelic beings, are childlike. Their faces are childlike. There's a question whether it was two boys or a boy and a girl. The point is that they were faces of children. So let's get to children. What do children have? They have a certain innocence. They have a certain exuberance and a certain enthusiasm for life. Like, I don't know, one of my grandchildren had a siddur party recently, and he got a siddur. He received a siddur. All right, my 3-year-old grandsons, they had a 3-year-old. They had a 3-year-old party, and they got a kippah. They got a yarmulke for and they are so excited about these kippot, right? They're so excited, like their whole world is just amazing and fantastic because they got these kippot. Like, we lose that sense of excitement and like our whole body is alive. Like she's shaking. He's so excited and so happy. Like, we lose that. Where does that go? Why can't we have that back? You know, we're sort of jaded by life, but as we get older, let's look back at these kuruvim. Let's look back at these children. Let's interact with children. I don't know. I interact with children. I work with children every day, and they're so sweet. They're so sweet because they're untainted and they're loving and their faces are open and they want to learn and they want to know and they're excited So should we. We should be excited when good things happen to other people. We should be excited when we learn something new. We should be excited to learn. Like, don't stop learning. Like, we talk about. Actually, there's a question as to why these two kuruvim are children and not like old wizened Torah scholars, you know. But why aren't they? I don't know, because maybe the wise older, you know, Torah scholar has a certain lack of open enthusiasm. I don't know. But anyway, these faces are of babies or of young children, and perhaps we can learn from that the need or the benefit of being enthusiastic about our lives, about our learning and our desire to learn, and that as children we're never done. Right? The children might think they know everything, but they know they don't know everything, but they think they know everything. Right? So too, we might think we know everything, but we really don't know anything. And actually what's really interesting is in the making of the Aron, it says in the Torah exactly how to make this Aron, this ark, and what the specifications are, what the sizes of the things are. And it actually says that it has to be made of acacia wood, as I mentioned, 2.5 cubits in length, and 1.5 cubits in width, and 1.5 cubits in height. It is the only vessel in the Mishkan that has half measurements, right? Every other vessel in the tabernacle has whole measurements. It's only the Aron that has half measurements. What's a half measurement meant to teach us? So I read that one of the things it teaches us is that we're never done, right? With Aaron representing Torah wisdom, the Aaron representing where the 10 Commandments go, where the Torah goes, right? We're never full, we're never whole, we're never done. We keep going. We have a whole lifetime, we're still not done. So the Aaron is the only vessel that has half measurements to indicate to us that we are continually needing to learn and grow, and we're never done, we're never finished, we never said, okay, I've learned everything, you know, like I've learned everything by the time I'm bar mitzvah, I've learned everything by the time I'm 99 years old. I don't know, the rabbi in Boca Raton, he has a lot of older people coming to his classes, and like they're so excited, they keep coming to class, they're not working anymore, they're retired, and his classes are packed. Because people are recognizing, okay, now I have more time. I'm going to keep learning because I haven't learned anything, hardly anything. I need to keep learning, like even as much as you know. And even if you've learned it 100 times, you have to learn it 101 times, right? So there's this injunction to just keep learning because we're never done, we're never finished. Okay, so one of the things I want to say about the Mishkan is, as I mentioned before, the idea that when God created the world, He created a place from within His existence for us to exist, and now we're creating somehow there's this idea of Tzimtzum where God withdraws, He sort of hides Himself so we can exist. But that same word Tzimtzum, where God sort of withdraws and hides so that we can have a perception of existence, that word Tzimtzum also applies to a concentration of God in one place, a concentration of God in this Mishkan that we're building for Him, right? We're building a place for Him to come and live amongst our midst. How do we do that? By our desire for that, by our following the rules, right? We have to follow the rules, right? If we want the acupuncture needle to hit the right place, we have to put it in the right place so that the energy flows, otherwise it's not going to flow. If you want the energy to come down, if you want godliness to manifest itself, we have to put the acupuncture in the right spot. We have to put the specifications have to be exactly as God says. Otherwise, it won't work. If you don't put the dot on the .com, you're not going to get your email to where it needs to go. Everything has to be very specifically followed. But what we have is we have this sort of paradox between God allowing us space by separating, so to speak, from us, and by there being presence of God in the Mishkan. So we have this sort of like juxtaposition of presence and separation. Presence and separation. And I think that's also something that we can learn in our lives, where we have relationships with people. So we don't want to be like so overbearing that we're like controlling them and telling them what to do and like in their space all the time. On the other hand, we don't want to be distant that we don't care and we're not part of their lives, right? There's a balance. There's a good balance somewhere between being in a relationship where there's space for the separateness of the other person, and there's a perception that we're with you, that I'm with you. I'm with you, but I'm separate from you, right? I respect you. I give you the opportunity to make your own decisions. I, as a human person, don't know exactly your position. I don't know everything that you need, that you are. I'm not walking in your shoes. I can't judge you. I can't know everything about you, but I can be present with you. I can be present with you, and I can be separate from you. And this kind of paradox of relationship that God's showing us by saying, here's a Mishkan, I'll descend my presence on the Mishkan so that you have a presence of me, but I'm also separate from you, and you have to come look for me, but also how much you want to look for me, how much you want to have a relationship with me will be how much I'll have a relationship with you. So there's this kind of balance that we have in our relationship to God, with a separateness and a distance and a presence. And here in the Parshat Terumah, we're learning about how to create a place for God, a place within our hearts and a place within our construct of the Mishkan. Okay, so we're giving our things, we're giving of ourselves, we're giving our time, we're giving our materials, we're giving of ourselves. And as I mentioned, when it says the word take, it's taking because it's not really mine anyway. I'm just like the transitory holder of this money or of this gold or silver or whatever. So when it's being taken, you're taking it. But also what's happening is that I'm receiving, right? So when I give, I also receive, right? So we have a lot of Torah written about this, about how when we give, we receive, right? So as much as we want to give as people who want to be givers, we also receive when we give. Like we feel good, or there's something that we receive in it. So it creates a cycle. It says more than in the Gemara, it says more than the calf wants to suckle, the mother wants to nurse. Maybe the other way around. No, that's right. So I as a person want to give. I want to give to my children. I want to give to my friends, right? And when they take from me, I feel I get something back, right? So there's a story about the son who goes and has chicken soup with his mother. He doesn't like chicken soup, but his mother really wants to give him chicken soup, and it gives her so much pleasure to give him chicken soup, even if he doesn't want the chicken soup. That's not the point. The point is he wants to give to her, so he will eat her chicken soup and he will relish and he will say, "Oh, Mum, it's great chicken soup," because by doing that, he's giving her the possibility and the pleasure of giving to him. So it's sort of like a cycle that goes around. So when we're giving, we're also receiving. We're benefiting from what we give. And we've talked about this before, that what do we take with us when we're done in this world, when our souls leave this world, when we die and we are born into the next world? What do we take with us? And there's this whole thing about we don't take anything with us, but except we do take with us our good name. We do take with us the good things we've done. We do take with us what we have given away. Isn't that amazing? We take with us into the spiritual world, into the world of spirituality, we take with us what we have given away. I know that one sink in, which is pretty amazing. That's how it works. There's I think in France there was a tradition to make coffins, which is also called an aron. When we get put into when our bodies get put into the coffin, we're being put into an aron. So that's amazing. So the coffins in France were made out of the dining room table of the deceased. The dining room table, on some level, for hopefully for us, represents a place where we welcomed other people into our home, a place where we fed other people, a place where we learnt Torah, a place where there's something linked to our dining room tables, that we've created goodness, we've done good things around our dining room table. So when we're done with this world, we take the dining room table and we make the aron, we make the coffin out of it, and then we go into the next world, lying in our dining room tables, which is an interesting thought. I don't think it's done in America today, but that used to be a custom, that the dining room table, where so much goodness and so much good that was put into the world happened, that dining room table became your coffin and you were buried in it. All right, but we take with us what we have given away. So when we're giving to the Mishkan, to build the Mishkan, we're also receiving something, and that we're going to take with us. Again, the terminology of take. Okay, so the idea that this aron is created. Let me read a little bit about the aron. So it says that the aron is made out, and I told you the specifications of size, and you shall cover it with pure gold. From within and from without shall you cover it. We talked about that. And you shall make on it a gold crown all around. You shall cast it for 4 rings of gold and place them on its 4 corners, 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on its second side. And you shall make staves of acacia wood, which cover them with gold, and insert the staves into the rings on the sides of the ark, with which to carry the ark. The staves shall remain in the rings of the ark. They may not be removed from it. You shall place in the ark of the testimony of tablets that I give you. So this is where we're learning that the planks, the staves, these poles that are put through these rings are never to be removed. That's, again, the only vessel where the staves that are used to carry the aron are never removed. With the other objects, the other vessels in the tabernacle that also have staves, they get removed. So as you know, we wandered in the desert for 40 years, and that there were certain times where it was time for the Jewish people to move, and we disassembled the Mishkan, we took everything with us, we moved to the new place, and we set up shop again, and we put everything back together again. So we would take out the staves of the shulchan or of the other vessels in the Mishkan, but we didn't take the staves out ever of the ark. That is actually one of the mitzvot in the Torah, in this week's Torah part, is not to remove the staves ever. They are to remain there forever. And there's a medrash that tells us that literally the aron carried itself. So as much as we come along and it's okay, it's time to move, and we're going to lift up the aron and we're going to move it, the understanding that we have mystically is that the aron carried itself. It didn't have any weight. It lifted up on its own. But we sort of put in our effort. We all lifted up the staves as if we were going to move it, and it moved as well. It lifted us up. Again, this notion of lifting us up, taking us into another realm, lifting us up out of the physical world. It's an amazing idea. So we come along, it didn't lift up on its own. We had to put an effort in to start to raise up the staffs, and then it would rise and it would move, and we would go along with it. So here we learned a couple of things. One is that the aron represents wisdom of Torah, God's wisdom in the world, right? So that's going to lift us up, right? As much as we think we're lifting it up, it's lifting us up, right? So in order to be raised up, we have to go into the Torah. We have to raise ourselves into the godly world and not be stuck in the physical mundane world. We need the physical mundane world. We want to elevate that too, but it's only raised up as much as we connect to something outside of it, take it up into the spiritual world. So the aron represents the spiritual world, represents godliness, represents Torah wisdom, God wisdom, right? So we want to attach ourselves to that. And when God says it's time to move, we got to be ready to move. That has to go wherever we go. Wherever we're told to go, we're going to take it with us. And there's no moment, there's no waste, there's apparently some kind of discussion as to how much we're allowed to touch the aron. It's this very pure, holy thing. And it's also really interesting. as you know, I'm on the Chevra Kadisha, and when we prepare a body for burial, there's something we're very careful is to try not to touch the woman that we're washing. Women wash women, men wash men. We're very careful not to touch her more than we need to. We don't touch her as much as we need to do what we're doing, but don't do extra, or don't take extra, don't touch her extra. And I'm wondering if it's linked to don't touch the Aron. Like there's times where we have to touch the Aron. There are times where we have to touch the body, but not too much. Don't do it more than you have to. Don't add to that. Just do what you have to do. Just lift up the Aron. Don't touch the Aron too much. Like if you took the staves out and then you put the staves back in, you might have to touch it more. Don't touch it. There's something very holy about this. Something very special about this. Something very separate. You gotta hold back. You gotta hold off. So the staves, when we lift the stave, they always have to be adjoined. Like the Torah is ready to move whenever. The Torah goes with us wherever we go. Wherever we are, the Torah goes with us, right? The Torah isn't stuck in one place. The Torah isn't only in Jerusalem. The Torah isn't only in one place. It's wherever we go, the Torah goes to, and it's ready to move at any moment. We're back to this idea of zrizus. We're back to this idea of alacrity and doing things quickly and doing things fast. When it's time to move, we've got to take that Torah with us, and we don't have time to mess around. We're not going to wait. We're going to be ready to go. So there's an aspect of ready to go. There's an aspect of don't touch something that's super holy, and give it the respect and dignity that it needs. And then what's the third idea? There's a third idea. I can't remember. Oh, and that it will lift us up. This idea of it lifting us up, right? So when we come to lift it up, it lifts us up. We're coming to lift it up, and yet it's lifting us up. We put in our efforts, and then God does the rest. When it comes to the menorah, so in the Mishkan we have a menorah, and God says to Moses, "You're going to make the menorah, and here's how you make it. You shall make a menorah of pure gold. Hammered out shall the menorah be. Its base, its shaft, its cups, its knobs, its blossoms shall be hammered from it. 6 branches shall emerge from its sides, 3 branches of the menorah from one side, and 3 branches of the menorah from the second side." And then it goes on to describe the menorah. And it should be made of pure gold with all these vessels. And see and make according to the form that you are shown on the mountain. The fact is that Moses couldn't make the menorah. He didn't know how to make the menorah. God could show him a vision, give him a symbol, right? We didn't say, okay, here's how you actually make the menorah. He didn't know how to make the menorah. He was shown how to make the menorah, but he couldn't do it. And in fact, the Medrash, the oral Torah teaches us that he threw the gold into a fire, and out of the fire came this menorah that God had showed him on the mountain. So again, as much as we put in our efforts, as much as we do everything we can, as much as we might have a vision of what we want to achieve, whether or not we achieve it is not up to us, right? So Moses had an image of a menorah that he wanted to build, that he was asked to build, to construct, with these different branches, with the knobs and the different kind of detail that was going to be on this menorah, but he couldn't make it, and it was almost like beyond him. So God's saying, I actually don't want you to make it. He's almost saying, I want you to try to make it. I want you to make that attempt. I want you to put your effort in, and I'll take it the rest of the way. I'll produce it for you. I'll take you over that chasm, right? So as much as we might think, oh, I'll never do that, I'll never get there, or I'll never be this, or I'll never be that, we don't know unless we try. And when we try, whether or not we're successful is not up to us. Our success is not in our hands. It's so hard for us to understand this. We think, and maybe it gets back to the whole money thing. If I work harder, if I do this, if I go into this scheme and I do this, I'll make more money, and then I'll make, it's all about me. It's all about what I do. If I do this, if X happens, Y is. Well, you all know people who work super hard and make no money. And we know people who don't work at all and make tons of money. So it's not kind of mixed in with our efforts. On some level, can we really pull ourselves out, so to speak, pull ourselves out of the equation and say, our success is not in our hands, it's in God's hands, right? So put my effort in, I'll try to make the menorah, I'll try to lift up the Aron, but the actual moving and lifting of the Aron is in God's hands. The actual result of the menorah coming out of the fire is God making it happen, is making the miraculous happen. That is the tail end of our efforts. So again, we're partners. This is God saying, you are partners with me in the world. You and I were in this together, and we're gonna make the world, and we're gonna lift the world, and you're gonna do your bit, and I'll do the rest. I'll do the rest. And this shittim word, one of the again, we talked about, shittim being goodness and shalom and forgiveness, but the Yeshua, that the end, when at the end of days we're going to put our efforts in, but that the actual end of days is out of our, pretty much out of our hands. It's going to be God bringing it along. So this idea of putting our efforts in, the idea of it happening, because God wants it to happen, but wanting us to be co-partners, wanting us to put our efforts in, wanting us to have zrizos, to have excitement, to go do it with enthusiasm, with passion, to want that relationship, to want that connection. And to all be enjoined in it together. We're all going to give. We're all going to give of our resources. We're all going to be part of this, and we're all going to be partners with God to bring godliness into the world. Okay, so and this idea of God being present and God being separate, the idea of being a giver and how to exercise our giving muscles, how important that is, and so I just want to go back that we had 3 contributions that were required of us to build the Mishkan. One was the voluntary one, which what we're talking about now, with all these 13 materials that went into building the vessels, etc. But there were 2 others that were mandatory. We had to give them. One was to build the Adonim. These were the silver sockets onto which the poles would rest. So they were the foundation of the Mishkan, was made out of silver. And then also there was a mandatory contribution of money to pay for the sacrifices for all the animals and so on that would be brought. So those were the 2 mandatory ones, and the one that was obligatory is the building. But the idea that the silver that went into these sockets, so that's the foundation. So the foundation of anything is really crucial and really important. It's really important what's laid down in the beginning, and what's laid down in the beginning are these silver sockets that come from a mandatory contribution of the people. So one of the things I thought was really interesting about that is that this was something that we had to do, and it was something that was done with great clarity. We knew what we were doing. We knew we were putting it into the foundation, and it is likened in our sources that this Adonim, this silver that we donated to build these foundations, was based on chesed, based on kindness. And we learned that from Abraham, our forefather. Abraham, if you remember, was the personification of kindness in the world, chesed. He was just kind and just doing and doing. And that, we understand, said the Kabbalists, is the foundation of the world. The foundation of the world is kindness. So the foundation of the Mishkan has to be kindness. And so what are we supposed to then maybe come out of that and say the foundation of our lives have to be kindness, not unmitigated kindness without any boundaries, but the core of who we want to be, who we should be kindness. There should be kindness that emanates from us at our core, at our foundation, at our base, like Abraham, who that was who he was, and that was how we built our Mishkan, and that's how we build ourselves, with the basis of chesed. So chesed is the right side. It's the right side of the body. The left side, and the second contribution went to the sacrifices. So who was the quintessential sacrifice? It was Isaac, right? The sacrifice, the binding of Isaac, who was the willing sacrifice. He was the one who was willing to sacrifice himself, and he represents the second half of the next part, the overlay of the foundation. We've got the foundation of chesed, and then we have this ability to sacrifice ourselves, and then we have all these voluntary contributions. Then we have all of this, which represents the final sort of coming together of the Abraham and the Isaac into the Jacob. And we are in the Jacob phase, so to speak, in the sense that we're struggling. We're in a place of darkness. Jacob is likened unto the evening service at nighttime, where we don't see clearly, where we struggle to see the light. I'm going to quote this. I don't know if this is an easy quote to process, but we struggle to see light of spirituality through the murky darkness of the corporeal existence of exile. So where we are in our world, where we are sort of mired in physicality, and it's dark where we are, we struggle to see the light of spirituality through that darkness. And that was the struggle that Jacob, with Jacob and the struggling with the angel, and Jacob that becomes Yisrael. And so we are struggling. We're in that struggle phase. And here we have, again, in our Torah portion, some of the ways in which we can pull ourselves beyond the struggle phase by being givers, by doing it with alacrity, by being like the children on top of this Aaron, by looking into the Torah, find the wisdom of how to live our lives, by having a foundation of chesed, by wanting and building places and in our hearts and in our communities of godliness and spirituality, putting our efforts in, like we did with the Aaron, like we did with the menorah, where we put an effort in, and then God took it the rest of the way. God created the menorah out of the fire. God literally lifted up the Aaron. We got lifted up with it. And actually the word Terumah for this week's Torah portion is lifting up. We were lifted up by our contributions. And on the top of these keruvim, these amazing little angelic figures. So I'm going to end with one more thought, which is that these keruvim only appear in the Mishkan. They're in 3 different places in the Mishkan. They're on top of the Aaron, as I described. They're in the curtains that separate the Holy of Holies from the rest of the tabernacle. And they're also on the outside of the tabernacle, on the coverings of the tabernacle. There are 3 places where these cherubs, these keruvim, exist in the Mishkan. The other place that they exist in the Torah is, if you remember back to the Adam and Eve story, where Adam and Eve eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they're exiled from the Garden of Eden. And what stops them coming back in is 2 cherubs. There are 2 cherubs stationed at the gates of the Garden of Eden, preventing Adam and Eve from returning back into the garden. And it says that they were holding fiery swords, and it were preventing them from returning to the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is where mankind had a stroll, so to speak, in the park with God, where God and man were really at this ideal relationship of God and man. And we're post-Eden, right? We're in the post-Eden phase. We don't have that anymore, but we want to get back to that. There's a desire for us to want to get back to the relationship that Adam and Eve had when they were in the Garden of Eden before they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the angels that are guarding the gate, stopping Adam and Eve going back into the garden, these are the same angels that are on top of the Aaron. They're the same angels that are in the partitions between the Holy of Holies and the rest of the Mishkan, and they're over the top of the whole Mishkan. They're in those coverings, indicating perhaps that what people had achieved at this point was angels that were not blocking the people from having a relationship with God like they had at Garden of Eden. But now these angels, they don't have the fiery swords, and they are literally welcoming us and inviting us to enter into God's world, enter into the Garden of Eden, enter into a relationship with God. So these keruvim that are on top of the Aaron now have a different purpose. They're not there to block us and to push us out. They're there to welcome us back in. And I think that's a really good place to end, is to say, like, the Mishkan that we're building, the place where we can take the Sinai experience with us into the wilderness, into exile, into our lives. Like, we have our Sinai experiences, but where are our keruvim welcoming us back in? Who are our angels that are welcoming back in? And maybe that is the message, that in all of our lives there are people from whom we learn. When we talked about the Aaron having half measures because we're not done learning, there's still learning to do, and we're not whole in our learning, right? But we also are not whole because we can't learn alone. We can't do this on our own. We have to do this with other people. We have to spar, we have to talk, we have to share ideas, we have to learn from other people, we have to be in those relationships with other people to keep our journey going, to keep us part of something, and to find those angelic people in our lives who are going to bring us back in. Chabad is amazing. Chabad is literally all over the world, right? Bringing back the sparks of Judaism and Jewish people back to their tradition, back to their inheritance, bringing them back. Maybe those are the angels. Maybe just like we have the keruvim in the Mishkan that are bringing us back into a relationship to God, maybe there are keruvim, there are angels in our world who are bringing us back. And when we get it right, these angels these keruvim on top of the Aron are going to be facing each other. When we get it wrong, they're going to be back to back, and they're not going to be facing each other. They're not going to be facing the Torah. Like, the focus is the Torah. The central, the central heart of the Jewish people isn't a place. It's a time, I would say, it's Shabbat and the holidays, and it's the ability, the Torah that we have that goes with us wherever we go. We never leave it behind. It's always with us. So on that note, I wish you all a very good week.